The morning sun cast long shadows across Earth's capital city when the sky suddenly changed. One moment it was clear blue. The next it was filled with massive ships that seemed to be made of living crystal. They appeared without warning, without sound, as if reality itself had been torn open to let them through. Admiral Tae-ho Kim was drinking his morning coffee when his communication device started screaming with alerts. Within minutes, he was racing through the corridors of Earth Defense Command, his boots echoing off the metal floors. Officers ran past him, their faces pale with shock. In 40 years of military service, Tae-ho had never seen his people look so afraid. The main command center buzzed with activity. Dozens of screens showed the alien ships hanging motionless above major cities around the world. Seoul, New York, London, Tokyo. Every important human settlement now lived under the shadow of these crystal giants. The ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, like frozen lightning captured in glass. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," called out Lieutenant Woo Jin Nam from his station. His young hands shook as he worked the controls. "It's coming from all the ships at once on every frequency we monitor." Tae-ho nodded grimly. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, then showed the image of something that was clearly not human. The alien was tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished metal. Its eyes were large and completely black without any visible pupils. When it spoke, its voice was like wind chimes mixed with the sound of breaking glass. "I am War Commander Veltar of the Valeth Empire," the alien said. The words came through their translation systems clearly, though there was something cold and mechanical about them. "We have conquered 43 species across this galaxy. Each one made the wise choice to surrender when they understood our power." The alien paused, tilting its head in a way that reminded Tae-ho of a bird studying an insect. "You have 72 of your hours to make the same choice. Surrender all your worlds. Submit to Valeth rule. Accept our protection and guidance. Do this, and your species will continue to exist as our servants." Another pause. This time the alien's expression changed slightly, becoming even colder. "Refuse, and we will cleanse every world you inhabit. Your choice is simple. Serve or die. We await your answer." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in complete silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the room exploded into activity as everyone started talking at once. "How many ships?" Tae-ho asked, his voice cutting through the noise. 200 confirmed, sir," replied Captain Dong-Woo Lee, reading from his instruments. "Each one is roughly the size of our largest battleships, but the energy readings are off the charts. We've never seen anything like their power systems." Dr. Soo-Jin Park, Earth's leading expert on alien life, had been studying the transmission recordings. She looked up from her screens with a puzzled expression. "Admiral, there's something strange about their communication patterns. They seem very formal, very rehearsed, like they've given this exact speech many times before." "Which they probably have," Tae-ho said bitterly. 43 species, they said, all surrendered. "But sir," Dr. Park continued, "they're scanning. Patterns are odd too. They're mapping our military installations but completely ignoring civilian areas. It's like they expect us to roll over without a fight." Captain Lee pulled up tactical displays on the side screens. "Our fleet is scattered across 17 star systems. If we called everyone back to Earth, it would take weeks. And even then, we'd be outnumbered 20-1. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings. The Terran Council was called into session. Politicians argued in loud voices about whether humanity should surrender or fight. Some said it was madness to resist such overwhelming force. Others said that freedom was worth any price. President Mi-young Choi sat at the head of the council table, listening to the arguments with a calm expression. She had been elected just 2 years ago on a promise to keep humanity safe and prosperous. Now she faced a choice that no leader in human history had ever faced. "Admiral Kim," she said, finally cutting through the debate, "what is your military assessment?" Tae-ho stood up slowly. He had been thinking about this question since the aliens first appeared. "Madam President, in terms of raw firepower, we cannot win. Their technology is hundreds, maybe thousands of years ahead of ours. Any direct confrontation would end with human defeat. Murmurs of despair rippled through the council chamber. However, Tejo continued, raising his voice. I've been studying their behavior and their ultimatum. Dr. Park is right. They act like they've never faced real resistance. Every species they've conquered gave up immediately when faced with overwhelming force. And your point? Asked Counselor Han, an elderly man who favored surrender. My point is that they don't understand humans. They expect us to think like every other species they've met. They expect us to calculate the odds and choose survival over freedom. Tejo looked around the room, meeting each counselor's eyes in turn. But that's not who we are. Dr. Park nodded in agreement. The Admiral is right. I've analyzed their psychological profiles based on the transmission. They're apex predators from a world where nothing ever challenged them. They literally cannot understand why anyone would choose to fight against impossible odds. President, Choi leaned forward. Are you suggesting we fight? I'm suggesting we do what humans do best, Tejo said. We adapt. We improvise. We refuse to quit even when logic tells us we should. These aliens have never met a species like us. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the decision was unanimous. Not because everyone agreed that fighting was wise, but because everyone agreed that living as slaves was worse than dying free. As the 72-hour deadline approached, humanity's answer became clear. It came not in words, but in actions. Across all 17 human star systems, military forces prepared for battle. Civilian populations were evacuated to underground shelters or distant space stations. Emergency factories began producing weapons and ammunition around the clock. The aliens had expected fear and surrender. Instead, they found a species that chose defiance. When the deadline expired, War Commander Veltar looked at his instruments with confusion. No surrender message had been received. No white flags were flying. Instead, human ships were moving into defensive positions, and human stations were powering up weapons they didn't even know the primitives possessed. For the first time in 10,000 years of conquest, the Valeth Empire faced something completely unexpected. An enemy that refused to be conquered. The first shots of the war were fired not at Earth, but at the Proxima Centauri mining colony, 3 light-years away. War Commander Veltar had decided to make an example of humanity's most distant outpost. A single Valeth cruiser, the Shard of Dominion, dropped out of hyperspace expecting to find scared miners ready to surrender. Instead, they found Commander Jamin Ko waiting for them. Ko had spent his entire adult life blasting apart asteroids to find precious metals. He understood explosives better than anyone in human space. When the alien ultimatum came, he didn't waste time arguing or planning elaborate defenses. He simply did what miners do best. He blew things up. The asteroid belt around Proxima Centauri had been turned into the largest minefield in human history. Thousands of mining charges, each one powerful enough to crack open a small moon, floated silently in space. They were connected by invisible laser triggers and hidden inside hollowed-out rocks that looked completely natural. The Shard of Dominion moved into the belt with confidence. Valeth ships had shields that could stop any known weapon. Their hulls were made of materials harder than diamond. They had never met anything that could seriously damage them. The first mine that exploded took out one of their escort ships completely. The blast was so powerful that it lit up space like a small sun. The second mine, triggered by the debris from the first explosion, crippled another escort. By the time the Valeth realized what was happening, they were trapped in a chain reaction of destruction. Commander Ko watched from his hidden command post inside a large asteroid. His miners had volunteered to stay behind and help fight, even though they knew it probably meant death. As the alien ships struggled to escape his minefield, Ko activated his radio transmitter. "This is Proxima Centauri calling all human forces," he said calmly, as if he was reporting a normal day's mining results. "First blood goes to humanity. The aliens can be hurt." Meanwhile, in Earth's solar system, Captain Hairin Yoon was putting her own plan into action. She commanded what appeared to be a small fleet of cargo ships, slow, harmless vessels designed to carry supplies between Earth and the outer planets. The alien scanners dismissed them as no threat at all. This was exactly what Yoon had hoped. For when the Valeth fleet moved to begin their attack on Earth's orbital stations, the cargo ships suddenly dropped their fake outer hulls. Underneath, they revealed themselves to be warships bristling with experimental weapons that human scientists had been developing in secret for decades. The aliens had never seen weapons like these before. Plasma cannons that could cut through their shields, particle beams that could overload their computers. Most frightening of all, the human ships didn't fight like any civilized species should fight. They came at the aliens from all directions at once, using their small size and speed to avoid the massive alien weapons. Captain Yoon's ship, the Soul's Pride, led the attack. Her crew had trained for this moment for months, practicing maneuvers that would have been considered crazy by any military academy. They flew their ship like a fighter pilot instead of a capital ship captain, spinning and diving and using the enemy's size against them. But the moment that truly shocked the Valeth came when Lieutenant Wu Jin Nam's fighter was hit by alien fire. His ship was dying, atmosphere leaking out through holes in the hull, engines failing, weapons gone. Any reasonable pilot would have ejected and hoped for rescue. Nam did something else entirely. He pointed his crippled fighter directly at the bridge of the nearest Valeth cruiser and pushed his engines to maximum power. The aliens watched in disbelief as the tiny human ship smashed into their command center like a guided missile. The explosion took out half their fleet's communications and killed their second-in-command. War Commander Veltar stared at the tactical displays in his command center, trying to understand what he was seeing. In every previous conquest, the enemy had fought defensively, trying to protect their ships and preserve their lives. These humans were throwing their ships away like weapons, treating their own lives as just another tool of war. They fight without honor, said his tactical officer, a younger Valeth whose voice shook with confusion. They destroy themselves to harm us. This is madness. No, Veltar said slowly, beginning to understand something terrible. This is what happens when prey refuses to accept that it is prey. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships, outnumbered and outgunned, used every dirty trick they could think of. They hid behind asteroids and space debris. They used their own destroyed ships as cover. They sent out false surrender signals, then attacked when the aliens came close to accept their surrender. Most shocking of all, they never stopped fighting. Even when their ships were crippled and their weapons were gone, humans would ram their vessels into alien hulls or set off their own reactors as bombs. They fought like cornered animals, except animals eventually gave up when the situation was hopeless. These humans seemed incapable of accepting hopelessness. By the end of the first day, the Valeth had lost 30% of their Earth attack force. This was more ships than they had lost in their last 10 conquests combined. Even worse, they had gained almost nothing. Earth's orbital defenses were damaged but still functional. The human fleet was scattered but not destroyed. War Commander Veltar made a decision that shocked his own crew. He ordered a retreat to hyperspace. "Sir?" asked his tactical officer. "We still have superior numbers. We can still complete the conquest." "At what cost?" Veltar replied, looking at the casualty reports. "We lost more ships today than in the last 100 years of expansion, and these humans." He paused, studying the battle recordings. They learned quickly. Each attack was different from the last. They adapted their tactics during the battle itself. In the aftermath of the first engagement, both sides took stock of what had happened. On Earth, Admiral Tae-ho Kim gathered his surviving commanders for an emergency meeting. The mood was grim but determined. "They'll be back," said Captain Lee, whose ship had taken heavy damage but survived. "And next time they'll be ready for our tricks." Dr. Soo-jin Park had been analyzing recordings of the alien ships during combat. "Actually, I'm not sure they will be ready," she said. "Look at these tactical patterns. They barely changed their formations during the entire battle. It's like they only know one way to fight." Dr. Hyun-woo Lim, the Federation's chief military strategist, nodded in agreement. "They fight like they're still conquering the first species they ever met." They haven't had to evolve their tactics because every enemy has surrendered before they needed to adapt. Admiral Kim leaned back in his chair, thinking, "So we hurt them more than they expected, and they don't know how to respond." "Exactly," Dr. Lim said. "We have something they've never encountered before. An enemy that refuses to quit and learns from every mistake. They may have better technology, but we have something more important." "What's that?" asked Captain Yoon. "Experience with real war," Admiral Kim said grimly. "Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know how to adapt, how to innovate, how to keep fighting even when everything seems lost. They've only known easy victories against enemies who give up immediately." As reports came in from other human colonies, the same pattern emerged everywhere. The aliens had expected quick surrenders and easy occupations. Instead, they found prepared defenses, unexpected tactics, and humans who simply refused to accept defeat. The war had begun, and already the Valeth Empire was learning a hard lesson. There was a difference between being powerful and being ready for a real fight. 6 months after the first battle, the war had spread across 17 star systems. The Valeth Empire, embarrassed by their initial losses, sent reinforcements. Not just more ships, but their absolute best. The Extinction Fleet, commanded by Supreme Admiral Kethvar, who had never lost a single campaign in 300 years of conquest. The new fleet was 3 times larger than the first one and carried weapons designed to destroy entire planets. Kethvar had studied the battle recordings from the initial invasion and was confident he understood the human problem. These primitives simply needed to be hit harder and faster than they could adapt. He was wrong. The humans had not been idle during those 6 months. Chief Engineer Boram Seo had been working around the clock in secret facilities, taking apart captured alien technology piece by piece. Her team of scientists and engineers had managed something the Valeth thought impossible. They had reverse-engineered alien weapons and power systems. More importantly, Dr. Yeonsu Han had been busy as well. Before the war, she had been a designer of strategy games, creating complex scenarios where players had to outthink opponents with superior resources. Now she applied those same skills to real warfare, analyzing every recorded alien battle, looking for patterns and weaknesses. "They're predictable," she explained to Admiral Tae-ho Kim during a strategy meeting on the hidden fortress of Titan Base. "Look at these formations. They always attack the same way. Overwhelming force applied directly to the strongest enemy position. It's efficient when your enemy fights back conventionally, but we're not conventional." Captain Jin Bei, who had been promoted after her heroic actions at the Battle of Europa, studied the tactical displays. "So what do you suggest? We can't match their firepower and they have twice as many ships as before." Dr. Han smiled. It was not a nice smile. "We don't try to match them. We make them think they're fighting the wrong war entirely." The test of her strategy came during the defense of the Tau Ceti system. Supreme Admiral Kethvar arrived with 600 ships, enough firepower to crack a moon in half. He expected to find human forces arranged in defensive formations around the inhabited planets, ready for a proper battle. Instead, he found empty space. The human fleet was nowhere to be seen. Kethvar's sensors picked up scattered signals from the asteroid belt and some activity around the gas giant's moons, but no organized resistance. It seemed the humans had simply run away. This should have been suspicious, but Kethvar had studied the battle recordings and thought he understood human psychology. They were brave, but not suicidal. Faced with overwhelming force, they had finally made the logical choice to retreat. He ordered his fleet to begin the occupation of Tau Ceti's inhabited worlds. The attack came from everywhere at once. Human ships emerged from hiding places that shouldn't have been possible. Some had been buried in the rings of the gas giant, their heat signatures masked by the natural radiation. Others had been waiting inside hollow asteroids that looked empty to alien scanners. Still more had been hiding behind the system's star itself, using its magnetic field to conceal their presence. But the real shock was how they fought. Instead of forming up into proper battle lines, the human ships scattered in all directions, each one acting independently. They used swarm tactics that the Valeth had never seen before. attacking like a pack of wild animals instead of a civilized military force. Captain Bay's ship, the Inchin's Revenge, led a squadron of modified destroyers in a maneuver that made Kethvar's tactical computers crash trying to analyze it. Her ship split up and approached the alien formation from 6 different angles, then suddenly converged on a single target at exactly the same moment. The concentrated firepower punched through shields that should have been impenetrable. Even worse for the aliens, the humans had learned to use psychological warfare. They broadcast messages on all frequencies during the battle, not threats or demands, but recordings of previous human victories. The aliens found themselves listening to the death screams of Valeth crews and the sounds of their invincible ships being torn apart. "They want us to know they can kill us," reported Kethvar's communications officer, his voice shaking. "They want us to be afraid." For the first time in his long career, Supreme Admiral Kethvar felt something he had never experienced before: doubt, not just about winning this battle, but about whether the Valeth truly were the supreme beings they had always believed themselves to be. The turning point came when Admiral Seung-ho Park, Dr. Soo-jin Park's brother, executed a maneuver that would be remembered in military academies for centuries. He ordered the entire human fleet to appear to retreat, with each ship fleeing in a different direction. The Valeth, thinking they had finally broken human resistance, divided their forces to pursue. This was exactly what Park had hoped for. When the Valeth ships were scattered across the system, chasing individual human vessels, Park triggered the real trap. Hidden throughout the system were weapons platforms that Engineer Seo had built using captured alien technology. They had been completely invisible to Valeth scanners because they were built using the aliens' own stealth systems. More than that, human forces that had seemed to retreat suddenly turned around and attacked their pursuers. The scattered Valeth ships found themselves surrounded and outnumbered by enemies who appeared from nowhere. The Battle of Tau Ceti lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Valeth had lost their first planet-killer weapon, a ship so powerful it had never been damaged in 500 years of service. More importantly, they had lost something else: their confidence. Supreme Admiral Kethvar sent desperate messages back to the Valeth homeworld. "These humans fight without honor," he reported. "They use deception and misdirection. They hide and ambush and strike where we least expect them. They are unpredictable." The Valeth High Command was not pleased with these reports. Kethvar was their best admiral, commanding their most powerful fleet. If he could not defeat a primitive species like humanity, what did that say about Valeth's superiority? But the real problem was becoming clear to military analysts on both sides. The Valeth were fighting yesterday's war, while the humans were inventing tomorrow's. Dr. Yun-Soo Han had been right about alien predictability. Every time the Valeth adapted to human tactics, the humans had already moved on to something completely different. They fought like water, flowing around obstacles instead of trying to smash through them. "They learn faster than we do," admitted Kethvar's chief strategist during a private meeting. "Every engagement teaches them something new about our capabilities, but we gain almost nothing about theirs because they keep changing their methods." Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Kim was studying the latest battle reports with a mixture of pride and concern. "We're winning individual battles," he said to his staff, "but this is a war of attrition. They have more ships, more planets, more resources. Eventually, the numbers will catch up with us." Dr. Soo-jin Park had been analyzing captured Valeth prisoners and their technology. "Actually, I think we have an advantage they don't realize," she said. "Their entire empire is built on the assumption that they're unbeatable. They've never had to plan for a long war or adapt to changing circumstances. Their whole civilization is designed for quick victories. And ours is designed for survival," Captain Bay added. "Humans have been fighting for resources and territory since we climbed down from the trees. We know how to make do with less and fight smarter instead of harder." Engineer Seo looked up from her latest project, a hybrid weapon that combined human creativity with alien technology. "Plus, we're getting better at using their own tools against them. Every ship we capture, every piece of equipment we study makes us stronger." As the war entered its second year, Both sides had learned hard lessons. The Valeth had discovered that technological superiority meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. The humans had learned that they could not only survive against impossible odds, but actually win. But the greatest lesson was still to come. Sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted, and the predator becomes the prey. 2 years into the war, something impossible was happening across the galaxy. The Valeth Empire, which had conquered 43 species without a single defeat, was losing. Not just losing battles, but losing the war itself. Captain So Young Kim, Admiral Taeho Kim's daughter, crouched in the command center of a captured Valeth stealth ship as it drifted through enemy space. Her mission was supposed to be simple intelligence gathering, but what she had discovered would change everything humanity thought they knew about their enemy. "Are you recording this?" she whispered to her communications officer, Ensign Min Ho. "Cho, yes, Captain, but I'm not sure anyone back home will believe it." Through the ship's observation windows, they could see a Valeth military base on the planet below. It should have been a hive of activity. Ships launching, weapons being manufactured, troops training for the ongoing war against humanity. Instead, it looked almost abandoned. A few ships moved slowly between the docking platforms, and the energy readings from the factories were barely above minimum levels. "They're not building up for a major offensive," So Young said, studying the sensor readings. "They're barely maintaining what they have." This was the 5th Valeth system they had scouted, and the pattern was the same everywhere. The mighty Valeth war machine was running out of steam. More importantly, it was running out of will. The reason became clear when they intercepted Valeth military communications. The aliens were arguing among themselves, something their prisoners had said never happened during previous conquests. Commanders were questioning orders. Supply officers were complaining about resource shortages. Worst of all, ordinary Valeth soldiers were beginning to ask why they were fighting a war that seemed to have no end. "Sir," Ensign Cho said quietly, "you need to hear this transmission." The message was from a Valeth patrol ship to its base commander. "Request permission to avoid human-controlled sectors during our patrol route. My crew is uneasy about engaging human forces after what happened to the 13th Fleet." So Young felt a chill run down her spine. The Valeth were afraid. Not just cautious or respectful of human capabilities, but actually afraid of fighting them. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Dr. Ji-Hoon An was making an equally disturbing discovery. As the Federation's lead xenopsychologist, he had been studying captured Valeth prisoners for months, trying to understand how their minds worked. What he found challenged everything humans had assumed about their enemy. "They're not evil," he explained to a gathering of military and civilian leaders. "They're not even particularly aggressive by nature. They're apex predators from a world where nothing ever challenged them. For millions of years, their species has never encountered anything that could seriously threaten them." President Mi-young Choi leaned forward in her chair. "What does that mean for us?" "It means they literally cannot understand what we're doing," Dr. An continued. "To them, fighting against impossible odds is not brave, it's insane. Their entire psychology is built around the idea that superior force always wins. They cannot comprehend an enemy that refuses to accept defeat." Admiral Kim nodded grimly. "That explains why they keep making the same mistakes. They can't adapt because adaptation requires understanding that your current approach might be wrong." The conversation was interrupted when Captain So Young Kim's report arrived from deep space. As the assembled leaders read her intelligence summary, the room fell silent. The implications were staggering. "They're not just losing battles," said Dr. Soo-jin Park. "They're losing faith in their entire way of life." This gave Dr. Yoon-ji Song, a xenopsychologist working under Dr. An, a terrible idea. "What if we could make that worse?" she asked quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "Think about it," she continued. "Their whole empire is based on the belief that they're superior to everyone else. But we've proven that's not true. What if we made sure every Valeth in the galaxy knew it?" What followed was the strangest military operation in human history. Instead of weapons and ships, Dr. Song's plan used something far more powerful: information. Operation Mindbreak began 3 months later. Human ships equipped with powerful transmitters started broadcasting throughout Valeth space. But they weren't sending military communications or propaganda. Instead, they transmitted human culture, music, art, stories, philosophy. Most importantly, they broadcast recordings of human resilience and determination in the face of impossible odds. The effect on Valeth forces was devastating. For a species that had never encountered serious resistance, the idea that any being would choose death over submission was psychologically shattering. They began to question not just their current war, but their entire understanding of the universe. General Chang Min, who commanded the Federation's Special Operations Forces, took advantage of this psychological warfare by launching conventional attacks deep into Valeth territory. Operation Prometheus hit 17 different alien systems simultaneously, targeting not just military installations, but the supply lines that kept the Valeth war machine running. The aliens found themselves fighting on multiple fronts against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. Human forces, now equipped with captured and reverse-engineered Valeth technology, struck fast and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Commander Jamin Ko, the same mining engineer who had turned the Proxima Centauri asteroid belt into a weapon, was now working with engineer Bo-Ram Seo on something much more ambitious. What if we could turn their own technology against them? Ko asked during a planning session. Not just their weapons, but their entire infrastructure? Seo looked up from the Valeth computer system she had been studying. You mean some kind of virus? I mean their whole network runs on the assumption that only Valeth technology can interface with Valeth systems, Ko explained. But we've captured enough of their equipment to build interfaces that look exactly like their own tech. The result was Operation Trojan Horse, the most audacious cyber warfare attack in galactic history. Human infiltrators, using captured Valeth equipment and uniforms, penetrated major Valeth computer networks throughout their empire. Once inside, they didn't try to destroy the systems, they simply made them unreliable. Supply shipments got lost. Communications between fleets became garbled. Weapon systems developed mysterious glitches during combat. Nothing catastrophic enough to be obvious sabotage, but enough small problems to make the entire Valeth military infrastructure unreliable. Supreme Admiral Kethvar, his once mighty fleet reduced to less than half its original strength, found himself commanding forces that could no longer trust their own equipment. Worse, he could no longer trust his own people. Reports were coming in from throughout the empire of Valeth commanders refusing orders, Valeth crews abandoning their posts, and entire Valeth colonies declaring themselves neutral in the war. The final blow came when human forces launched their most daring raid yet. Captain Hyarin Yoon, now commanding a fleet of hybrid human Valeth warships, penetrated to within a few light years of the Valeth homeworld itself. Her mission wasn't to attack, it was simply to prove that humanity could reach the very heart of the Valeth Empire whenever they chose to. When news of the raid reached Valeth High Command, panic set in. For the first time in their species' history, the Valeth leadership faced the possibility that their homeworld itself might come under attack. "This is impossible," declared High Admiral Zevkar during an emergency session of the Valeth Ruling Council. "No inferior species has ever threatened the homeworld. It has never even been considered possible." "Perhaps," suggested one of his subordinates carefully, "these humans are not inferior after all." The silence that followed this statement was deafening. In 10,000 years of galactic expansion, no Valeth had ever questioned their fundamental superiority over other species. The idea that they might be equals, or even inferiors, to another race was literally unthinkable. But the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. The humans had not only survived the Valeth invasion, they had driven it back. They had taken the offensive and carried the war into Valeth space. They had proven that superior technology and overwhelming numbers meant nothing against superior strategy and unbreakable will. Supreme Admiral Kethvar, receiving his latest casualty reports, finally admitted what many Valeth military leaders had begun to suspect. "We cannot win this war, not against these humans. They fight like no species we have ever encountered. They adapt faster than we do. They learn from every defeat and turn it into a future victory." "Then what do you recommend?" asked High Admiral Zevkar. Kethvar's answer would have been unthinkable just 3 years earlier. We negotiate before they decide to finish what we started. 5 years after the Valeth first appeared in Earth's skies, Admiral Tae-ho Kim stood on the bridge of the battleship Terra's Vengeance, watching enemy ships through the observation windows. But these weren't human ships looking at alien vessels. These were human ships looking at the Valeth homeworld. The impossible had happened. Humanity had brought the war to the very heart of the Valeth Empire. "Sir, all fleets report ready," said Captain Dong-Woo Lee, now commanding his own battle group of hybrid human Valeth warships. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that they were using alien technology to threaten the aliens who had created it. Admiral Kim nodded but didn't give the attack order yet. This moment had been 5 years in the making, built on the sacrifice of thousands of human lives and the determination of an entire species that refused to surrender. He wanted to make sure they got it right. The plan for Operation Tsunami had been born from intelligence gathered by his daughter, Captain So-Young Kim. Her deep reconnaissance missions into Valeth space had revealed something shocking. The alien homeworld's defenses hadn't been updated in over 1,000 years. Why would they need to be? No enemy had ever come close to threatening Velthara Prime. That overconfidence was about to cost them everything. "Dr. Lim, are you ready with the surrender terms?" Admiral Kim asked. Dr. Hyunwoo Lim looked up from his communication station. In his hands was a document that would have seemed like fantasy just a few years ago. Terms of surrender for the Valeth Empire. "Not human surrender, Valeth surrender." "Yes, sir. Though I still can't quite believe we're in a position to offer them." The attack began at exactly 800 ship time. Commander Jamin Ko, the mining engineer who had struck the first blow of the war, now led the assault on the planet's orbital defense grid. His engineers had studied the alien systems for months and found their weakness. The defenses were automated and hadn't been programmed to deal with attackers using Valeth technology. The human ships, disguised with captured alien identification, codes flew right through the outer defensive perimeter. By the time the Valeth realized what was happening, Ko's forces had already disabled half their orbital weapons platforms. But the real genius of the human strategy wasn't the technology, it was the psychology. Dr. Yun-Soo Han, the former game designer who had become humanity's greatest military strategist, had designed the entire operation around one simple principle: give the enemy something they had never experienced before. Instead of trying to destroy Velthara Prime, the humans offered to spare it. "This is Admiral Kim of the Terran Federation," came the transmission broadcast on all Valeth frequencies. "Your orbital defenses have been neutralized. Your fleet is outnumbered. Your empire is in rebellion. But we are not here to destroy your world." The silence that followed lasted nearly a minute. The Valeth High Command, watching human ships position themselves around their homeworld, couldn't understand what they were hearing. "We offer terms of surrender," Admiral Kim continued. "Complete withdrawal from all human territories, cessation of aggressive expansion, establishment of a neutral zone between our peoples. In exchange, we will spare your homeworld and provide medical aid to your wounded." Supreme Admiral Kethvar, commanding the last major Valeth fleet from his flagship in orbit, stared at his communication screens in disbelief. "They're offering us surrender terms? They could destroy us completely, but they're offering us terms?" His tactical officer was equally confused. "Sir, this makes no strategic sense. If they wanted to break our empire, now would be the time to do it." "Unless," Kethvar said slowly, beginning to understand something profound about their enemy. "They never wanted to break our empire. They just wanted us to leave them alone." The realization hit him like a physical blow. The humans hadn't been fighting for conquest or glory or revenge. They had been fighting for something much simpler and much more powerful: the right to exist as free beings. The Battle of Velthara Prime lasted 6 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Valeth, fighting to protect their homeworld for the first time in their species' history, discovered that they had forgotten how to fight defensively. Their entire military doctrine was built around overwhelming offense against weaker enemies. "Captain," Hyarin Yoon led the final assault on the Valeth Command Center. Her ship, the Soul's Pride, had been rebuilt twice during the war and now carried weapons that combined the best of human ingenuity and alien technology. As she watched Valeth ships flee rather than fight to protect their own planet, she realized the war was already over. "They're running," reported her tactical officer with amazement. "Their own homeworld is under attack and they're running. They don't know how to fight when they might lose," Yoon replied. "They've never had to learn." The final moment came when the Valeth High Command, faced with the destruction of their capital and the collapse of their empire, did something unprecedented. In their 10,000-year history, they asked for mercy. We accept your terms," came the transmission from the planetary surface. The voice belonged to High Admiral Zevkar, and it shook with emotions the proud Valeth had never felt before. Fear, humiliation, and desperate hope. Admiral Kim looked around the bridge of his ship at the faces of his crew. These were people who had lost friends, family members, entire worlds to the Valeth invasion. They had every right to demand complete destruction of their enemy. Instead, they had chosen something harder: forgiveness. "Transmission received and acknowledged," Admiral Kim replied. "All human forces, cease fire. Begin humanitarian operations." The formal surrender ceremony took place a week later, aboard the human flagship, Supreme Admiral Kethvar, his once magnificent uniform now bearing the scars of 5 years of war, met with Admiral Kim in what had once seemed impossible, a Valeth commander surrendering to a human. "I must ask," Kethvar said as they signed the treaty documents. "How did you defeat us? We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior firepower." Admiral Kim considered the question carefully. It was the same question he had been asking himself throughout the war. "You expected us to be like every other species you had conquered," he said finally. "You assumed that because we were weaker, we would accept being prey. You never considered that sometimes the prey evolves into something that hunts the hunters." Kethvar nodded slowly. "We thought strength was measured in weapons and ships." "Strength," Admiral Kim replied, "is measured in how long you can keep fighting when everything seems hopeless. It's measured in how quickly you can adapt when your old methods stop working. Most of all, it's measured in whether you're willing to die for something more important than yourself." The peace treaty that ended the human-Valeth war became a model for interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. The Valeth Empire, humbled but not destroyed, underwent massive reforms. They stopped their aggressive expansion and began working to repair the damage they had caused to the 43 species they had conquered. Many of those species, inspired by humanity's example, began demanding their own independence. Some negotiated for it, others fought for it. But all of them had learned a crucial lesson. No empire is so powerful that it cannot be challenged by determined resistance. The Terran Federation established the Galactic Defense Coalition, offering protection to any species threatened by imperial expansion. Dr. Sujin Park, now head of the Interspecies Research Institute, worked to preserve and protect the cultures of newly liberated species. Admiral Sung-Ho Park commanded the coalition fleet that ensured no species would ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. His sister continued her research, now studying how different species could work together instead of how they could destroy each other. 5 years later, Admiral Tae-ho Kim, now an old man with silver hair and tired eyes, stood before an assembly of representatives from 67 different species. The meeting hall was built on a neutral world, designed by architects from a dozen different cultures working together. "The Valeth made a simple mistake," he told the assembled delegates. "They believed that because humanity was younger, smaller, and less advanced, we would be easy prey. They forgot the most important lesson in nature. It's not the strongest or the biggest that survives. It's the most adaptable." In the audience, former War Commander Veltar, now serving as an ambassador from the reformed Valeth Republic, nodded in agreement. He wore the scars of his defeat with dignity, having learned perhaps better than any alien what it truly meant to underestimate the human spirit. "Today, no species stands alone," Admiral Kim continued. "No empire can threaten the weak without facing the combined strength of the free. The age of conquest through overwhelming force is over. We have entered the age of cooperation through mutual respect. The applause that followed came from beings with scales, fur, feathers, and forms that had no Earth equivalent. But they all shared one thing in common. They had learned that freedom was worth fighting for, and that sometimes the smallest and weakest could teach the largest and strongest the most important lessons of all. The galaxy would never make the mistake of underestimating humanity again. More importantly, it would never again accept that might makes right, or that superior technology guaranteed victory over superior spirit. The war was over, but the peace that followed,